walk you through naming some chemical compounds. We're going to do all of them together, covalent and ionic. So the first thing you should always do is decide whether the compound is going to be covalent or ionic. Right? So first thing we should do. So deciding that means we need to look at the first element and decide, is this element a metal or a non-metal? Nitrogen, where it falls in the periodic table, okay, is a non-metal. Okay. Right. Nitrogen was over here on the right-hand side of the periodic table, so it is a non-metal. So therefore, I'm going to label this as a non-metal. If the first element is a non-metal, then the compound is a covalent compound. If it is a covalent compound, then we are going to need prefixes when we name it. Okay? So let's go ahead and let's start naming it. N is nitrogen. There is one nitrogen. So the prefix for one is mono, but you never want to start off a compound's name with mono. So if the first element only has one, we're just going to put the name of that element, which is nitrogen. Okay. I'm going to come over here and look at my second element. My second element has a subscript, which means that's how many of them I have. So I have 3 hydrogens. I need the prefix for 3. The 3 is tri. And then the hydrogen, I'm going to name the hydrogen, but in this case, when we end a name, we want to end the name with IDE. So we have to change the ending of hydrogen to IDE. So it's going to be hydride. Nitrogen trihydride is the name of this compound. Let's try another one. Right. So we're going to see first, again, decide if this compound is going to be ionic or covalent. So I'm going to look at my first element and see, is my first element a metal or a non-metal? I go over here in my periodic table, I look for there it is, Ca. Ca is in group 2, period 4. Okay, so it is right there. So that means it's a metal. If the first element is a metal, then we are looking. Okay. I want to see. Also, you need to see if it's a transition metal. So if you say it's a metal, is it a transition metal? Meaning, is it in that dip? It is not. It's just a metal, which means this is a ionic compound. If it is an ionic compound, we do not need prefixes when we name this compound. Okay? All we're going to do is we're going to name each one of the ions. So Ca is calcium. So we're going to write calcium. Look at my second ion, which is Cl, which is chlorine. Again, we must change the ending to IDE, so chlorine becomes chloride. The 2 didn't matter because we don't need any prefixes for this, all right? So it's just calcium chloride. Let's try, I'm going to extend this page. I'm going to give you one that's not on here. I do so again, I'm going to box the first element, decide if that is a metal or a non-metal. C is over here on the periodic table. It's carbon. If it's on the right-hand side, again, it is a non-metal. If it is a non-metal, we're looking at a covalent compound. And if it is covalent, then we are going to go ahead and we're going to need prefixes. Okay. So we're going to start with carbon. So I look at carbon. There are 3 carbons. The number behind the element tells you how many we have. So again, the prefix for 3 is tri. So we have tricarbon. Look at our second element. And look how many of them we have. We have 6. The prefix for 6 is hexa. And then H is hydrogen. Again, change the ending to IDE, and we have hydride. Tricarbon hexahydride. Let's go to another one. All right, so this one's a big one, but that's okay. I'm not going to freak out about it. We're going to start off, again, by looking at the first element. Okay, we need to decide, is this element a metal, a transition metal, or a non-metal? So when I go to my periodic table over here, I notice that PB is right here in the center. Okay? So it's this guy right here. PB is in the dip on the periodic table. That's PD. So PB is over here. My bad. SN and PB are considered transition metals, and anything in the dip of the periodic table is also a transition metal. So that is super important with what we're doing here. So it's going to be a transition metal. It's still a metal, so it's still ionic, which means no prefixes. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to name this. Looking on the periodic table, PB is lead. Then we need to figure out Roman numerals. This is the part that you need. Right? We're going to put parentheses and we're going to come back to the Roman numeral, but it's going to need a Roman numeral. Then I'm going to look at what's left here. Right? There's more than one element here, which means I'm going to need to take a look. At a polyatomic ion chart. So I need to pull that up for y'all. It's in your star chart. Or not star chart, it's in your Google Classroom. Alright, so if I was looking over here, we have CrO4. So I'm going to find CrO4 on this table. And it happens to be right here. Okay? This is it. So the name of it is called chromate. If you get any of the ions from this chart, you find its name over here, we do not change the ending of those. We just write what it is. So it is chromate. Right? Now we need to go back to this whole charge thing. Right? So what I need to do is I need to figure out what the charge is on the chromate, right? So I have the charge of chromate, okay? See the CrO4 has a little 2 minus up here. So what I want to do is I'm going to put a -2. But I also have 3 of these guys, right? So it needs to be times 3. So -2 times 3 is -6. Okay? Well, if this is -6, then the PB over here has to be +6. This has to be, right? Because in a ionic compound, you want the charges to cancel out and go to 0. So the metal must cancel out the non-metal or the polyatomic ion. And then again, we have 2 of these guys here. So on this side, we divide by how many we have. And we get 3. And that's our number. So this is going to go down here using Roman numerals. Okay? A little confusing, I know. All right. So let's try another one. Down here, let's extend the page a little bit. Oops. Okay. Let me think. Let's do so S10 2, and we'll say O3. Okay. Sorry, it took me a minute to think of one. Let's go ahead, again, decide if this is a metal or a non-metal, or if it's a transition metal. So I go back over here, and I go to my star chart. Sn is right over here, above Pb. It is a transition metal, even though it's not in a dip. So I have to take that into account. So this is another transition metal, which means it's ionic, which means we do not need prefixes. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to name it. Sn is 10. And since it says it's a transition metal, I need some kind of Roman numerals and a prefix, which we'll decide. And then I need to know the name of this. Go to periodic table, you see O is oxygen. We have to change the ending to IDE, so this is going to be oxide. Now we need to find the charge, right? So I need to find the charge on this part first, on the non-metal or the polyatomic, all right? So I have to find the ending first. So if I go back over to my star chart, and I look at what we're in, right? Remember, if we count, starting at group 1 will form a +1 charge, group 2 a +2. Skip the dip in the periodic table, +3. Group 4A is 4. Then we count down. Group 5A is -3, and group 6A, where oxygen is a -2. So I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to say -2. All right? Times, well, how many of these guys do I have, right? I have 3 of them, so times 3. So again, -6 times 3, or -2 times 3 gives me -6. Okay? Which means over here, okay, we get a +6. This time we need to divide by how many we have here, which is 2. And again, by accident, that mean it, we get 3. So this is 3. Okay? So this is figuring out your charges and how you get your Roman numerals. Okay? Okay. And that is the end of learning how to do our naming of compounds.